husband to you is secondary. If the woman see the dog feeling cold, she take him in the bed, put the man on the floor. The man have a girlfriend, he come home late. The dog make noise and the wife awake. She calls up the husband, you ungrateful brute. But she patting puppy head saying, oh, puppy cute. So if I get a chance, let me tell you plain, I don't want to come as no man again, not me. No, I want to be a puppy.
Don't give uncle said no.
Yo, DJ, make a tune.
How we love for one son. Don't give water not day. Don't give water not day. Don't give water them fire. How we love for one son. Don't give chachi said no. Don't give brownie said no. My beloved for one son. If Papa said no, don't give no, don't give Uncle said no. My beloved for one child.
You have to know how to talk to a woman if you want to get their attention. Everything is changing nowadays, they even changing love conversation. Don't tell them I love you, they say that is old fashioned. You have to explain your feeling with original expression. So do like me, listen how to talk to your young lady. I love you like a gourmet love a frog. I love you like a drunk man love a grog. I love you like a toothpaste love a brush. Girl, I love you like a toilet love a flush. La 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 la. La 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 la. A woman is an amazing creature. She's so full of contradiction. But she is extremely vulnerable when you're using fancy expressions. Don't mind if you're ugly and you have an old motor car. If you're sweet, talk a woman, to her you're a movie star. So take my advice, talk to your lady tender and nice. I love you like a virus, love a flu. I love you like a sauce, love a barbecue. I love you like a dog, love a lot of trees. And I love you like a drugstore.
Yo, DJ, make a tune.
La 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 la. La la la. A lady had a loving husband. He buys she a new Toyota.
Yes, me $1. Yes, me $2. Yes, me €1. Yes, me one naira. Ganja money, yeah. Ganja money, yo. Give me 1 shilling. I said to give me 1 shilling. One nice shilling. Yes, it's good for cancer. Any kind of cancer. I say even skin cancer. It's good for glaucoma. Ganja money, yeah. Ganja money, yo. Give me 1 shilling. I said to give me 1 shilling. I said to give me 1 shilling.
I hear a story from Ken Carson, cricket game in the jungle. Sunday morning right after church, big crowd assembled. Donkey say me fuss, I batting, you know I love the cricket. Crapper sit down behind the stumps, he say alright, I keep in wicket.
Pull up this song now, eh? DJ Metatone, hey yo, you think bad, you know, you said number 1, you know, hey yo, you're the sickest DJ, hey yo, bless it. Yo, DJ Metatone, you're the crowd. Yo, DJ Metatone, you're the crowd motivator. It's like the party don't start till you start mixing.
I hear a story from Ken Crosby. Cricket game in the jungle. Sunday morning right after church. Big crowd assemble. Donkey say me fuss, I batting. You know I love me cricket. Crapper sit down behind the stumps. He say alright, I keep in wicket. Giraffe and kangaroo at fine leg. Snake down in the gully. Umpire parrot in the tree. He say alright fellas, are you ready? The crowd start to sing very loud if you hear them. Hit the ball, donkey, hit the ball. Cover drive him and make him ball. Hook the man like Kylie Charan and put him straight in the stand. Elephant turn and pick up the ball. He say, I open the bowling. Monkey say, boy, the size of you. If you say you're bowling, you're bowling. Well, elephant walk about half mile, and then he started running. He coming down like a express train. The whole blasted jungle shaking. When he see elephant coming down, old donkey start to shiver. Red Hands hit him a couple bites. He say, man, pat and pats together. And then the ones in the crowd start to sing very loud if you hear them. Hit the ball, donkey, hit the ball. Cover drive him and make him ball. Hook the man like Vivian Richard and put him straight out the yard.
Oh, good evening. Another day. Good evening to you and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. Tuesday evening. It's a quiet evening here in Buxton. You may hear some echoes, but it's there's a prayer service outside our home studio here. Pastor Kwame, one of my favorite pastors in the village, is holding forth, and reminds me of the old days. We don't have it a lot these days. They used to call them wayside preachers. You know, on any given night, you could find, some preacher holding forth at the street corner. And it was quite a learning experience for youngsters in those days. The way they interpret the Bible and so forth, and very colorful characters. So it's good to see that some of the churches still do the wayside preaching, I don't know how many people bother to stop and listen. Back in the old days, they used to come out and set up their table, and they had the not jog lamp. I forgot the lamp that they used to have, and they started to preach, whether it was one person or two people, it didn't matter, and people would stop and became part of the audience. I don't know how many people are moved to do that these days. But welcome, please share the live, and let everyone know that we're on. Welcome, wherever you're joining us from, whether it's here on the east coast of Demerara or Georgetown, or anywhere on Region 4, Region 3, West Side, West Bank, West Coast, and the Essequibo Islands, Region 2, of course, Essequibo Coast, Region 1 out there in the Northwest, as they say in the old days, Northwest, Mabaruma, Marijuana, Matthews Ridge, and Port Kaituma, and all those places out there. Good evening to you if you're joining us from West Coast Babis, one of my favorite places in Guyana, the villages on West Coast Babis. Good evening to you if you're joining us from Ithaca down the river, down the Kanji River, down the Berbice River, and of course on the Quarantine Coast. Good evening to all of you out there. Region 10, Linden and Kokoni and all those surrounding areas. And I understand that people joining us, somebody told me to get us loud and clear in the interior, Region 8, Region 7, Baltic area there, Region 9 out there in Letem, that area out there. Welcome to Politics 101. And of course, those of us in the diaspora, in the wider Caribbean, in New York, North America in general. Good evening to my home people in Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia area. Still consider that to be my U.S. home. Of course, all my relatives are there, and I spent some of the better years of my life in that area. Went to school there, Meaning University, and good evening to all of you in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, the tri-state area. Of course, Brooklyn, where a lot of our people are. Welcome to those of you joining us from other parts of the United States, the Midwest. Some of you join us from Chicago and Texas and out there on the West Coast of California, Arizona, where I spent a good portion of my adult life working, and have lots of friends there still. How about those of you who join us from Canada? Good evening to you. Lots of my friends out there. A few of them were home during the Easter holidays. Good evening to you, Mr. Huntley, Mr. Brian Moses, and Colin Burke, and I saw Lennox Willis a couple of nights ago. But good evening to all the Canadians. I know lots of you are in the Toronto area. Good evening to you. And we can't forget the troopers out there in Europe, especially in the United Kingdom. It's late there, and late there in the United Kingdom. So to tune into this program, you have to be a real trooper. I have two kids who live in the United Kingdom. My daughter who was visiting this past 2 weeks, and she would tell me, I have to listen to your rebroadcast because I sleep early, so I can't catch the live. But there are people out there who stay up to listen to the program live. Good evening to you. If you join us from Georgetown, as I said yesterday, we had the homegoing ceremonies for Clinton Conway, co-host of Speaking Out with Paul Slow, and the police fraternity was out there in its numbers. Senior policeman, I think a deputy commissioner, Mr. Watts, was there, and he spoke. And he said that he's an ardent listener of Speaking Out. And as he was passing me, he said, I even listened to Dr. Hines. And he did say that as an intelligence officer, they listen to all programs. Good evening to you. Um, the, the young man after the program who hanging out with friends, and he said, Dr. Hines, keep the fast bowling going. These days, spin don't do the trick in Guyana. You have to keep it fast and furious. People are connected, and that is so amazing that you go around the country and people identify you. Today I was trying to do some shopping, and the lady come up to me. She looked me straight in my face, and she said, "You Zion's right?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I didn't expect to see you in these places. You to get people to do shopping for you." So I assured her I have not arrived at that stage yet. I still do my own grocery shopping and other shopping, and I rather enjoy it because I wouldn't have it any other way. And in any case, it gives you the opportunity to interact with people. I don't know how one can be a political activist and don't interact with people. Good evening. Please share the link and let everyone know, those who have not realized yet, that we're back. The internet situation here has been rectified. I want to thank those who expedited the process, because the construction that is going on in the 4-lane highway seriously disrupted the internet service, and the workers worked diligently to get things back to normal after about 2 months. So it's good to have a reliable service back. Good evening to all of you. I today was my errands day, and I had to go into the bank today, and of course the complaints were enormous. I think our banks have not yet caught up with the kind of modernization we see in other parts of the world, including our Caribbean. You still have to spend hours. I spent about, I would say, about 2 hours in the bank, and I went for something very simple. My card was deactivated, and I had to go in to reactivate it, and it took me 2 hours. 2 hours. I went to one person, and they sent me to another line. I understand that line was the wrong line. I went to another line and another line, and eventually something that took all of 3 or 4 minutes to do, I had to spend 2 hours. It's amazing, and one knows how difficult it is, because I could have been doing so many other things, of course, to get parking. You spend about half an hour before you get a little squeeze somewhere, and then you go and you spend another 2 hours to get something that took about 3 or 4 minutes to get done. When we're talking about development, that's not development at all. It is not development. And everybody complains. There are people in there complaining among themselves. Some complain to me who recognize me about how difficult it is to deal with the banks, and the amount of time you have to spend there. I don't know. The bank that I went to, I went to the same bank in another Caribbean country, and quick in and out. But the same bank operating in Guyana, you take forever in the bank. We really. What about people who have to go to work and have to leave work to go into the banks? It means that when they should be working, they have to be sitting down in the bank to get simple things done, affecting productivity. It's they have to correct it. They have to correct it. It's really ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But while I was there, I ran into a fellow villager. People had come to live in the village, and I when they left the village, I didn't know where they were, and so I ran into one of the sisters in the bank, and it was good catching up. She recognized my voice, and she called me over. I didn't recognize her at first, but it was good to catch up with somebody that I hadn't seen, I would say, for almost 40 years, or probably more than that, because, they came to live in the village and then left. And the usual thing, you don't know where people are gone. And invariably, they migrated. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101 tonight. Where are we going? Where are we going as a country? I mean, that's the question people keep asking. Where are we going as a country? I met a young man today who working in one of the institutions, and he's so frustrated. He said that he's going away to study. He's going to do a PhD. He is just frustrating working in the institution that he's working in, and it's so difficult. It's so difficult. Said he preferred to stay and to work in his country, but he's so frustrated at his workplace that the opportunity came along for him to go abroad to do a PhD, and he decided that's what he's going to do. I asked him if he's coming back, and he wasn't sure. He said he would love to come back. The reality is that our country is a contradiction. Our country is a contradiction. You see the surface, and then you scratch beneath the surface, and you see something totally different. You see the opposite, actually. And it's the alienation. If one drops from Mars or Venus or one of the other planets and come down to Earth, and you listen to the government and some supporters of the government and even some detractors of the government, and you will hear all these wonderful things about what's happening in our country. But when you talk to people are alienated from it. People are alienated. And I don't know if you can have development if people are alienated from the process. It's not development if people are alienated from the process. And the level of alienation in the country is It's it's ridiculously high. People don't feel that they are part of this process. People don't feel that it's about them. And I don't like use the term, I don't like to say, you know, including PPP supporters. It is true that people who I assume are PPP supporters, and some people who say they're PPP supporters, they do express privately their own alienation from the process. And I'm hesitant about saying that because I don't like, because you're never too sure. You're never too sure. Um, People vote for a political party, puts it in power, and then are not happy with the political party. But then the next election, they go back and they vote for the same party. And I've explained on this program that I don't see that as something bad. It may be a contradiction because people ultimately vote interests. What are your interests? People, what are, in the case of Guyana, where the group matters, what are your group interests? You know, in America, they say you vote your pocketbook. And America is driven by individualism, the individualist ethos. We in Guyana have never been driven by the individualist ethos. We've been driven by the group ethos. And when we say group in Guyana, we primarily mean ethnic groups. And in the old days of ideological politics, people may have voted based on their class. But class has always been tempered by racial considerations, ethnic considerations. And so people vote group interests. You know, 1/3 of the African Guyanese electorate voted for Win. And some people read that to mean that it's a break with ethnic politics. And with all due respect to those people, I and others of similar persuasion try to explain the complexity. You know, it's a group. They voted their group interests. You know, they felt as African Guyanese that their own African Guyanese party could not remove the PPPs. A lot of them are saying that. And they felt that the other new party could do it. And as it turned out, you know, 1/3 of the electorate and group interests, you know. And so when we are talking about development, if we're talking just about development within the context of the individual, we are missing a big part of the game. At the end of the day, the distribution of wealth in Guyana, the distribution of resources, in Guyana, is determined largely by the group that you belong to. Largely by the group you belong to. I was making the point last night that, you know, if you go around the African Guyanese villages and you call a couple of boys and you say to them, look, $2 million, look, $3 million, this is a contract I'm giving you to go and build some roads. And in a situation where the young men are not working or don't have access to that resource, you know, they take the couple $1 million. They take the couple $1 million.
I was making the point that their counterpart that they went to school with, while they are getting a contract, these are African boys getting a contract for $3 million and $4 million and $5 million. The boy that they went to school with is getting a contract for 500 million. And I'm saying, close your eyes and fast forward to the next 20 years at a minimum. And if you get a contract, let's say you get a contract for $5 million every year for the next 20 years. That's $100 million you get that for 20 years. And just multiply the person who gets a contract for $500 million for the next 20 years. And you see the big gap in the kind of financial resource that comes to the different group. And the person with a $5 million contract is going to have more to save, more to invest, because he or she would have more disposable income. There's hardly very much disposable income you can get from a quote unquote $5 million contract, $3 million contract. In fact, it's not a contract, it's a bribe. And it puts us in a funny position because we know it's a bribe. We know it's a way of trying to buy people's votes, because that's the game in town now, buying the vote. And we know it's a bribe. And it would be good if we can tell our people, don't take bribes. But given the economic circumstances of our supporters, it's difficult to tell them, don't take the contract. Because in their head, they're taking the contract, but you know the contract is a form of bribe. And so it puts opposition leaders in this really funny position, and the PPP knows that, and they take advantage of it. You know, you can't go and tell people, don't take the contract because it's a bribe, and you are living comfortably, and these people are scrunting. And so the PPP takes advantage of that situation. And that is why I am positing the view that when you go to an election, you lose the election, or you lose the election, or people decide that you should not be elected, and you become the opposition. I think you got to walk on 2 feet. I said last night that you have to become a pressure group, but of course you got to prepare for the next election. And in our case, you may have local government elections intervening. And so you have to walk on 2 feet. You have to prepare for upcoming elections, but you also have to be a pressure group. Because in the circumstances, you are going to go to the next election, in which the question is, what you get to offer me? What you get to offer me? And if you're out of political office, you don't have the power to steer resources to your communities, to your supporters. And so the question you will have to face is, what you have to offer me? You can offer promises in your manifesto. If you vote me in, this is what I'm going to do. But the parties in power is coming and say, well, this is what I did for you in 5 years. And when the politics reach the point, what you do for me, it's a kind of political obscenity, because politics ought not to be about what you did for me. When you have no power to do anything for me, you have no power to determine how $1.5 trillion is spent. So you can do for me. You see, and so the opposition has to find a way to be able to pressure the government not to go into the communities and share out $5 million to 40 little boys and then force them to rear a red jersey, but to pressure them to make available in a structured way more resources to your community. That is the big challenge we have. The question is how you're going to force them to do it. And we have to find ways to force the government to do it. And that is what I mean by pressure group. You have to become a pressure group, even as you're preparing for elections. The governing party doesn't have to be a pressure group. The governing party has access to resources. When I go around, I listen to our supporters. They complain, understandably so. They're complaining. Look how these people run in this country. Look what these people doing. They're not even calling parliament. And you're hearing this from not just people who are detached from the process, but from some seasoned political people. It's the kind of the driven our people to complaining. And then you have to say to these people, but what you expect in a winner-take-all system? Do you expect the PPP to look after your supporters if they're not forced to? They wouldn't. The only way the PPP would be equitable in its distribution resources, they have to be forced to. And so even as people complain, we have to get into the mood of forcing the PPP. You know, it is said that, A. Philip Randolph and black leaders went to Roosevelt and were asking for more resources in the black community. He said, make me do it. And they planned the March on Washington. This is since in the 1940s. That march eventually took place in 1963. But Roosevelt reportedly said to them, make me do it. Make me do it. And I think a lot of opposition activists are not grounded in the art of make me do it. And because partly out of fear, but largely out of this political correctness. The PPP doesn't act politically correct. They do all kinds of things: domination, ethnic clientelism, the abuse of people. They don't behave correctly. But the opposition, which has more of an incentive to disturb their neighbor are the ones who tend to be politically correct. They choose their words very carefully. And we live in an era of social media, where forms of communication have changed. I like our slogan, friends, family, and favorites. But you examine that. Who are the friends? There are PPP people and their supporters, many of one ethnic group. Who are the family? If the party is made up mostly of East Indians, who the family are? Who are the favorites? But we don't want to use the E word. And I think that's a grave mistake. Because the PPP, when it was in opposition, was never fearful of saying to Indian people, they're doing this to you because you're Indian. When the Granger administration attempted to right-size Gaisuku, the PPP was overt to Indian people that in trying to think, they're trying to kill Indian people off. They're trying to take bread off the table from Indian people. They were overt in their rhetoric. They didn't hide. 7,000 Indian workers are going to be put out of bread. Doomsday. Doomsday. And it worked. Because if you're East Indian, sugar is what you know. And when your leaders come and tell you that your ethnic interests, this policy is aimed at you, you believe it. No, I think we made the error of underestimating the ethnic impact of our policy. The policy was right. Right-sizing the industry was right. But you were always going to have an ethnic backlash. And I think we were not sufficiently prepared for the ethnic backlash. And the reason we were not sufficiently prepared for the ethnic backlash is because we don't deal frontally with ethnic politics. So when the ethnic backlash came, we couldn't handle it because we took ethnicity out of our discourse. And the people, PPP was telling Indian people, this thing is aimed at you as Indians. It wasn't aimed at them as Indians. We know you can't sustain an industry. You are producing something at 40 cents and you gotta sell it for 15 and 20 cents. That is bad economics. You are subsidizing, not as the PPP is arguing, you're subsidizing the sugar workers. That may be just a part of it, but you're already subsidizing those who are buying the sugar. And we are selling the sugar to the Europeans. So we are subsidizing the European. When we produce sugar at 40 cents and sell it back at 20 cents, and we sell it to Europe, the European lady or gentleman who goes into the shop and buy 10 pounds of our sugar, 50% of that is subsidized. So the point I'm making here is that it's bad economics to continue to subsidize the sugar industry like that. But when you're dealing with an ethnic situation where the industry is dominated largely by people of one ethnic group, in a situation of ethnic hostility, you want to take into consideration the ethnic backlash. Now, does that mean that you don't right size? Yes, you right size, but you anticipate what the ethnic backlash is going to be, and you address it. We didn't do that as effectively as we should. And I am arguing that the reason we didn't do it is that we don't like to deal with ethnicity and race. On our side, black leaders, we tend to, and I think it's partly our own socialization in this Western notion of universality, that we tend to avoid the specific, And so we get the short end of the stick always, because we are dealing with a PPP that are frontal about race. Jagan was a communist, which means that he ought not to have dealt with race. He should have used class as his primary and perhaps only method of analysis. But as early as 1953, when Jagan wrote that small book, Forbidden Freedom, he spoke about East Indians being oppressed. Later on, he talked about East Indians being second-class citizens, petitioned the United Nations. In fact, Jagan, the interesting thing is that Sidney King, who said joint premiership with partition as a last resort, get tagged with the partition thing. But Digar had called for ideological partition. Remember, Digar was a capitalist. And he said, well, all who want to be socialists are going to live by themselves. And the capitalists go to live by ideological partition. And Jagan, writing to the United Nations and talking about second-class, Indian being second-class citizens, suggested that partition may well be the solution. As late as 1988, Jagan, in speaking to an Indian organization in New York, said that Indians are second-class citizens in Guyana. So I'm saying Indian leaders are much more open about expressing and protecting the ethnic interests of their supporters. They will use the rhetoric of class, social class, and so on, but they'll know that we live in an ethnically divided society and a racialized society, and they speak directly. Contrast that with the African leadership, including the African progressive leadership. Class become an end in itself. I hear that every day from fellow travelers, and they don't want to talk about race. They don't want to talk about race because they feel that they're going to lose votes if they talk about race. And so the class thing, or, people talk about multiracialism, especially people who come from my persuasion. We talk glibly about multiracialism, and that is supposed to mean that you don't talk about race, and the whole kind of Marxist kind of thing. And so therefore we don't communicate with our people in a direct way. We speak to our people in codes, while the other side speaks to their people in straight language. And sometimes our own people acquiesce to that kind of thing. I would say, if you look at the votes Win got, most of the votes, 75% of the votes, are from African Guyanese. They got some Amerindian votes and a sprinkling of East Indian votes. But you've never heard a Win leader. You've never heard a Win leader from Mohammed down to the others speak directly to African interests. Every now and again you would hear, especially the Amerindians, but even the non-Amerindians, they feel very comfortable about speaking to Amerindians as Amerindians, or indigenous people. But you've never heard a Win leader use the word African or Black or speak directly to the issues of African Guyanese. And they are where they are because 75% of their votes came from African people. Never. And they know they can get away with it. Because African people are not going to say, well, we vote for you and you are not looking after our ethnic interests. Because we have socialized our people to believe that ethnicity and race is a bad thing. Young man stopped me one day and he said, at times, I like what you're saying, but you must ease up with the race thing a little bit, man. You must ease up with the race thing. I like you, I just listen to you. They must ease up with the race thing. So in a sense, we have socialized our people to be fearful of the racial element. And it hurts us. An Indian is less likely to vote outside of the PPP for fear of the ethnic repercussions of that. Africans are more likely to vote outside their traditional way because they don't fear the ethnic repercussions. It's only afterwards they come to you and they say, these people are, they disrespect Black people. They're killing all Black people's children. But when they're casting that vote last year, the ethnic consideration was not overt. Might have been covert, but not overt. I'm saying you can't look at an ethnic society in which where you live, where you work, how much you earn is determined by your ethnicity and then ignore ethnicity. You say sugar worker, Indian. You say public servants, African. You say rice farmer, Indian. You say teacher, nurse, police, army, African. I am not making it up. It's there. Your employment, where you work, is largely determined by your ethnicity. It doesn't mean that you don't have a few Blacks in rice, or a few Blacks in sugar, or a few Blacks in commerce. It doesn't mean that you don't have a few Indians who are teachers, who are public servants, who are in the army, who are in the police. But the vast majority of of our employment, the place of employment, is determined by race. So race determines where you work. And where you work determines how much you earn. So by extension, race determines how much you earn. If you're a teacher, and teachers are getting 8 to 9% raise on $150,000, it means 75–80% of the people who are getting 8 to 9% are black people. And then you go to Gaisuko, the same workers, they're all workers, but you're working for Gaisuko. Gawu is a favorite union. Gawu don't even have to bargain, because sugar workers are going to, that's where the PPP gets its votes. So, more. So where you work determines how much you earn. And then how much you earn determines the cost of living. Because if you earn $150,000 a month and somebody else earns $300,000 a month, when you all face the market, the cost of living is steeper for the person who is earning $150,000. So ultimately, where you work, your wages, how much you can buy in the market, and where you live. If you're renting, you can't go and rent in an upscale area with $150,000. And so ultimately, race and ethnicity determine our existence in Guyana for the most part. But yet, those on our side of the aisle pretend it's not so. They know it's so. But there is an inordinate fear of dealing directly with the race problem. Fear of it. Fear of it. And we feel that if we deal with the race problem, we will cancel the class issue. No, race doesn't cancel class. Class is there. But the Indian working class sees itself as different from the African working class and vice versa. And the difference has to do with the ethnic problem. As they used to tell the poor whites in America, you may be poor, your life may be miserable, but you're white. And if you're white, you're superior. And perception becomes reality. Perception becomes reality. So ethnicity and race do not cancel class. Class is constant. Class is there. In any society, there are class divisions. It is whether the class division is what determines ultimately how people exist in the society. C.L.R. James, who was a Marxist, went to Mexico when the Russian Soviet leader Leon Trotsky, who was banished from the Soviet Union and ended up in Mexico. And James was in the United States. And James said he traveled to Mexico. And he said to Trotsky, that you do not understand the Negro question, as they called it back in those days. And he said I had to lecture him on the Negro question because Trotsky, you know, Marxist, and he was talking about world revolution and did not understand the Negro question. And James, who was a Trotskyite, a Marxist, went there and said, I had to tell him. And that is why, you know, they came up with the whole concept of black Marxism. Cedric Robinson has a book on black Marxism. You know, I'm a Marxist, but I am a black Marxist. That is, my Marxism is grounded in the experience of African people. When your Marxism is divorced from the community, then it becomes useless. And Jagan didn't make that error. Jagan's Marxism was grounded in Indianism. That's why he and Guyana had a long-standing disagreement. Because Guyana made it very clear that Jagan, you know, uses this Marxist rhetoric, but he mobilizes ethnically, and he got away with it. Jagan, you know, I think, I don't want to speak for him, but I think for the most part he was an atheist. But you go, I remember going into Indian homes, and you see the picture with the Indian deity, and then Jagan picture, two picture, the Indian deity and Jagan picture. Indian people understood. As I've said repeatedly on this program, Indian capitalists joined Jagan's Communist Party. What do they have in common, the Indian communists and the Indian capitalists? It can be ideology. What they had in common was their ethnicity. And we have them today. The Indian nationalists who are grounded in Indian culture, my friend Ravi Dev, for example. Indian nationalists grounded in Indian religion and Indian culture, but he has found common ground with Indians in the PPP. What do they have in common? They're Indianists. Today, the PPP is captured. The Communist Party is captured by the Indian money class. You can't tell the difference between the two. And then you have people like the Marxists, the Rohis and the Ramatars and so on, who ideologically don't like the direction in which the party has gone. In fact, the party has taken out socialism from its constitution. But Roy and Ramatar have not left. What do they have in common with these new boys who have denounced Jaganism? Ramatar and Roy and the people of the old school, Gail Tashir and all of them, they're Jaganites. And the PPP has denounced Jaganism. But they continue to support. What do they have in common? I know Rohi and Gail are not Indians, but they may not be Indians phenotypically, but they're Indians ideologically. And in case people get me wrong, you know, you can be phenotypically black and you're not ideologically black. You know the black skin, white mass, Frantz Fanon? You know? So you may not be phenotypically Indian, but you are ideologically Indian. So for those of you who are going to be jump on me, so I'm saying the old Jaganites have not broken with what has now become an anti-Jaganite party. And you know, they all the same insults at us and say, we are no longer the party of Walter Rodney. Perception on their part. When we say they're no longer the party of Jagan, there is verifiable evidence. They're not promoting capitalism, and not just promoting capitalism. The worst is a worse form of capitalism. The worst form of capitalism they've chosen. They've removed socialism from their constitution. That's verifiable. So this is not perception. There's always been a stream, a track in Indian Guyanese thought and political action, a praxis that sees making money as an end in itself. There's always been that stream there. And it is that stream that is now controlling the PPP. I mean, nothing wrong in being an Indian bourgeoisie or Indian businessman who want to make money. Nothing is wrong with that. But when you see making money as an end in itself, I want black people to make money too. So I don't want you all get me wrong and say I'm against making money. But when you ideologically see making money as an end in itself, that is, the means justify the end. It doesn't matter how you make the money. There's always been that strand in Indian Guyanese, and I suppose I can't talk for Indians in other places. There will always been that strand among Indian Guyanese. May not be a large group, because these things don't have to be a large group, but a critical mass of the elite. And it is that instinct that you make money. Making money is an end in itself. That is now dominating PPP and their policies. And then they try to sell it to black people and Amerindian people and tell them, don't worry with Heinz and them. Come and make money. Look, $3 million. That's the making money. Whereas Indians are making 1,000 times that, the Indian counterpart. So, and then African young people who are not grounded with a kind of consciousness fall for it. I go wear that jersey and go and wind up in a PPP band. That is the means towards getting rich. So we are in this serious state. Serious state of affairs. Because when this thing multiplies for the next 20 years, you see where we end up as a country. You see where we end up as a country. And we have to stop it. We have got to stop it. I don't want to spend the end of my life on a plantation. Not the plantation as it was during slavery. But the social relations of a plantation. I don't want it for me. I don't want it for black people. I don't want it for Amerindian people, but I can't speak for Amerindians. I be presumptuous. At least, even if, as the PPP would say, that people like myself don't speak for African people, well, they determine who speak for African people. They've gotten that control. But I am presumptuous enough, and people like me have to be presumptuous enough that we speak for African people. And I hold dearly to the Rodneyite thesis. I talk about racial discrimination today. I fight racial discrimination today so that I don't have to fight it tomorrow. And that is why, at a minimum, we need to have a government that is inclusive, not just in rhetoric, but in actuality. That when people look up, they must see their representatives in government. When Indian people look up, they see their representatives. When African people look up, they must see their representatives. When Amerindian people look up, they must see their representatives, and the other smaller ethnic groups too. When you look up and you don't see your representatives, you see people with black skins. But they're not your representatives. They represent their own individual interests and the interests of the dominant group in the organization that they have found themselves now. The black leaders in the PPP are representing East Indians because East Indians are the ones who vote for the PPP. And so therefore, when they get into cabinet or in parliament, they're doing so on the strength of Indian votes. And so they're there to represent East Indians. They're representing East Indians. They don't represent Africans. So we have to have a national government. And for those who try to tell you that national governments don't exist, we've always had national governments throughout history. Some of them temporary, some of them more permanent. Across there, Dutch Guyana, Suriname is a prime example. It's not a perfect national government, but it's way ahead of Guyana, grappling with the ethnic plurality of Suriname, Switzerland, Belgium, the Netherlands. All of those places have some form of consociationalism, or power sharing or shared governance that we call it here. And they govern themselves very quietly. When things got out of hand in Zimbabwe, the opposition leader and the government leader got together, formed a power sharing government. Same thing in Kenya. When things got bad there. The Mandela formula. When Mandela won the election, he brought in de Klerk as a vice president, brought in the National Party. And then when the Inkatha people, the Zulu people were making trouble, he brought in the Inkatha leader and put him in charge of home affairs. The Mandela formula. It's unfortunate they didn't continue with it. But you have had national governments. During the time of the war, Churchill called in Attlee and they formed a war government, power sharing government. In an ethnic society so sharply divided, you would think that naturally we would move there. They fight in Ireland until the Good Friday Agreement. It's not easy to manage those governments. It's not easy to manage any government. So the argument that PPP and PNC and APNU and whoever else can't sit down in a government together. All you're doing is that you're bringing the opposition from off the road and bring them in government, and you can sit there together. Because I'm not going there to hog up. If I'm in a power sharing government with PPP, I'm not going there to hog them up. I'm not going there to ask them for anything. I'm going there to represent the interests of my people. That when you bring a budget to cabinet of $1.5 trillion, I'm going to say, well, this is not moving here until African people who send me here, who I'm represented in this cabinet, until there's an equitable share in there for them. The system we have now is that the budget comes to Parliament, I make noise, but the PPP uses its majority and does what it wants. If I'm in cabinet, I get 2 bites. In cabinet, I say, well, we are able to say, this is not moving from me unless you make right for black people, and Amerindian people will say, until you make right for Amerindian people. So by the time the budget gets to Parliament, it's a fait accompli because we already fix it in cabinet. So I hear some of our supporters say they don't want power sharing. But if you don't want power sharing, you want domination or you want to be dominated. I don't want to dominate nobody, but I don't want to be dominated. What power sharing ensures is that I am in cabinet that makes the decision, first of all, on the size of the budget. Second, how the money is being divided up. If 55%, 50%, 51, 55% of the budget goes to infrastructure, the contractors are mostly Indian. It means that half of the budget is catering to one constituency. In cabinet, you're able to say, no, reduce that to 30% and take the rest of money, put here for salaries of public servants. I'm doing it where the decision is being made. Black people, you all please stop thinking small. You are going into power sharing government not to take anything from anybody, not to hug up anybody because we're going to argue in there too. But we're going to be arguing from a position of strength. In Parliament, we're arguing from a position of weakness because they will outvote us in Parliament. In cabinet, they will have to compromise. You want your people in cabinet because that's where decisions are being made. Who determines when Parliament sits? The government. The cabinet. If I'm in cabinet, then together we will determine how often Parliament sits. Revolution in thinking. We cannot continue to gamble our life away. Elections are not meant to be gamblers. Elections in normal societies are meant to produce governments for all of the people. Elections in Guyana produce governments of one side or the other. So it's a gamble. So we have to ensure that our elections are not a gamble. That when the elections are finished, win or lose, all of we there in there. All of we in there. All of we making the decisions together. We got to fight for it, though. It ain't coming easy. We got to fight for it. Black people, you all got to get in fighting mode. You all stop fighting. Either because we give up, or we're frustrated, or a small minority of us decide that we are going to accommodate with those that are meant to dominate us. We got to fight. And elections is not the only fight. That's one fight. I want 30, 40 big contracts in each African community. Not 3 million, not 4 million, 100 million, 200 million. I want 20, 30, 40 of that in each African community. We got to fight. We're not in power, so we can't do it. We got to fight to get in there. Or while we are fighting to get in there, we have to fight to push them to do it. As them boys in Snick used to say, if we can't sit at the table, we knock the damn foot off the table. I repeated it, and Rafi Dev never forgave me for saying that. And I stand by that. If you can't sit at the table and equitably distribute it, knock the damn foot off the table. Simple as that. That's a cardinal principle in any democratic order. We are what we are, and that's the way it's going to be. You can't educate for no equal opportunity. Talking about my freedom, my people's freedom. That's what I'm talking about. We are what we are, and that's the way it's going to be. Always. Self-definition. Self-definition. Lamin reminds us we may not be able to determine the price of sugar on the world market. We may not be able to determine the price of oil on the world market. But the one thing we have control over is to define who we are. Self-definition. Again, till tomorrow night.